What's going on, everybody? It's Jay here from Nerd Takes, and today I want to talk about a little bit of a rumor that we heard from the MCU this week. So, the rumor that we heard this week from Marvel was something that has to do with their next two Avengers films in their franchise, and I think it piqued a lot of fans' interest. What we heard was that previous MCU directors, the Russo brothers, may be in talks to return to the franchise to direct two upcoming Avengers movies, one of which will be Avengers Secret Wars. Now, for me, this was somewhat of a surprising bit of information to hear, more so from the side of the Russos than Marvel's. I think at this point, the MCU is a bit desperate to try and correct the path that they've been on with phases 4 and 5, so I'm not really surprised that they want to try anything they can to get a piece of that magic from the original three phases back. And the Russos have been very successful in their run at Marvel, so it's an obvious call to want to bring them back into the fold. But I was a bit surprised to hear that the Russos actually wanted to come back to the MCU right now. The last movie they directed was Avengers Endgame, which, regardless of what you may think about that one, for example, I think it was probably the weakest of the four movies they directed, it was undoubtedly a massive success. Now, for the record, I do think that movie is fine overall. I don't agree with a few of the creative decisions they made, but as a whole, it wasn't anything awful, so I can definitely understand why a lot of people really enjoy that one. But the other three movies they had directed in the franchise are some of my favorites to come out of the MCU. Now, when Endgame was released, they announced that it would be the last movie for them in the MCU, at least for now, as they put it. And then they went on to work on some other projects. And this made a lot of sense because, as most people know, working on these massive scale movies takes a lot of time and dedication to a point where I'm sure it doesn't really leave much time for any other projects directors may want to take on. So, seeing them step aside from the MCU after four movies made a lot of sense for them creatively. However, seeing them interested in returning to the MCU is something that they've always kind of alluded to potentially wanting to do, but it was still a little bit surprising to actually hear it being rumored. They have made it known for some time now that Secret Wars was something that they've always wanted to adapt for Marvel, so with that being part of the rumor, it did make sense. But I suppose the timing is what kind of caught me off guard because knowing that they may want to do two Avengers movies, if this rumor is true, was a bit earlier than I expected their return. What's interesting to me about all this is that the current state of the MCU is nowhere near what it used to be when the Russos finished their final film in the franchise. Phases 4 and 5 have not been particularly good for Marvel, minus a few movies that turned a profit, such as Spider Man No Way Home, Multiverse of Madness, and even Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So there's a part of me that's pretty curious of whether or not the Russos view this return as a way to kind of revive the franchise, or if it's just something that they want to return to because they enjoy the franchise and they really want to adapt Secret Wars. Perhaps it's honestly even a little bit of both. Generally speaking, I feel like this news has been met with a few different levels of interest. I think some people are flat out excited to hear about this potential return. Others, I think, may be a bit more cautiously optimistic about it. And then there's some who I think just don't really care at this point, which, in fairness, I can understand all three perspectives. I personally fall into the cautiously optimistic category here. I think anytime you hear the Russos will be directing something or even interested in directing something for the MCU, it's a good sign overall. For me, it's more about the direction and the path that the MCU has been on more than it is their involvement. The first thing that comes to mind with a couple of new Avengers movies is what characters are even going to make up this current Avengers team? Marvel has been attempting to push some lesser popular characters to the front of the MCU, which hasn't really been a successful attempt by them. So I'm really curious which characters are going to be the draw for audiences as it pertains to a new Avengers team. The other thing I'm wondering about is what exactly is the story that comes together for this next Avengers movie? So far, every Avengers movie has been a culmination of sorts for the phases that it finishes, and we've already made it through phase 4 now without any real connective story or overall threat the potential team could be working together and trying to stop. And now they are a few projects into phase 5 with a similar issue of no overall story developing among the different projects. Now, ultimately, if this rumor is true about the alleged interest of the Russos in returning to the MCU, I think at baseline it's a good sign in terms of what we'll get for the next couple Avengers movies. I think for me, my cautious optimism just comes from the fact that I haven't really liked 90% of what the MCU has created from movies to streaming service shows since the beginning of Phase 4. So I'm just not sure that a couple very good directors alone can really fix the overall issues with the MCU at this point. Even Deadpool and Wolverine, which is something that I'm actually pretty excited about and I do think is going to be good and most likely perform pretty well at the box office, is still something that I fear will be its own kind of one off project, similar to that of Spider Man No Way Home and Guardians of the Galaxy 3, where it's a well liked movie overall and turns a profit, but not one that can support the rest of what comes out in between these few good movies. But at the end of the day, just like anything else, we're going to have to wait and see the results. First, we have to see the Russo brothers officially sign on to take on these projects. Then we'll have to see what they create for us and whether or not it's good or bad and how it does at the box office. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back again soon.